have you on Sahara TV, Prof.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you too.
We're looking at some of the contemporary issues that Nigeria is facing currently. And we'd like to ask you, how do you perceive the current state of Nigeria's politics? And what do you see as the major challenges that the country is facing in this regard?
Thank you very much. And the challenges have been with us. Maybe you mean it's escalation or it's coloration. And these challenges have been with us since independence. There are twin problems, the political one and then the economic one. And when you combine both, they create a chaotic society, disorganization, massification of poverty. But these are not new challenges. And you notice Nigerians have been very much disappointed with each government. They were disappointed in the First Republic, the coup came. They were disappointed with successive military regimes, the coup came. So cumulatively, except for a very brief moment, the brief moment after the Civil War, when the dividends of the first rush of the oil money came, engineering middle class, the story has been consistent. So what do we have today? First, we have 130 million people in poverty. So if you take the figure of 200 million people, it means that only 70 million are putting food on their table comfortably. 130 million is too high for that poverty level. That's number one. Number two, we have now seen very clearly the decadence of values. So I was born in the 1950s, and those values were still there to some extent in the 60s. Fast forward 2023, December, values have degraded considerably. I gave 6 lectures October, and I was talking about values.
Yeah.
I spoke about values and leadership at Lagos State University, transformational values, Benue State University, values and religion at Mka, values and science at Chrisland. When values decay, it's difficult to have a platform that will fast forward your development. So, because when values decay, you enter into a big conundrum. Low trust. All societies in the world, they need trust to run. When you now have a low trust society, you can't organize credit. If you want to build a house in your village, you cannot even give your brother money because you are afraid your brother will steal your money. And people in diaspora, somebody will say they are building a house for them. They come home, there's no house on the land. I give money to someone to do the tomb for my mom. He didn't do it. Those are decaying values. Bear in mind, in traditional societies, we operated on 2 notions, shame and guilt. If you're a Christian or a Muslim, if you go to madrasa, as I did, although I'm not a Muslim, then those 2 ideas were part of your growing up. Shame means you do something that anybody related to you is not proud of. You call it, you see those 10 commandments in the Bible. And guilt means you did something bad, but you are not caught. Like you sneak to somebody's house and you have sex with the wife, but you are not caught, right?
Yeah.
So you can't be put to shame. But guilt, what you call conscience, we keep haunting you and haunting you and haunting you. And each time you have a problem, you attribute it to your transgression, just as David did in the Bible. But 2023, there's no more shame. There's no Nigerian senator who has shame. There's no Nigerian politician who has shame. And there's no more guilt. So the Senate leader, Akpabio, can do his 61st or 60th birthday, knowing full well the circumstances of his people are not good, but he's not guilty. So when you divorce guilt and shame from society, what you produce is called wickedness. I release a piece about Ika. That is wickedness. Because you can say human beings are programmed for self-destruction and things like that. But there is something that propels you not to be wicked. So now we are now moving to also, we are combining greed with wickedness. You understand? You can be greedy without being wicked. Because you can steal money, which is greed, right? But it doesn't mean you are wicked. You are a thief. Not the classic Robin Hood. I mean, the person can be a thief, but it doesn't mean the person is wicked. You understand? We now move into a combination of the era of greed and wickedness. And wickedness means that the people who govern you don't care, because they have become wicked people. So, and to overcome that combination of greed and wickedness, it is very, very difficult. I'm not done. I'm not done. I don't have a short answer to any question. It doesn't exist in my own thinking. So, we are now in a situation in which the younger people below the age of 40, right, are not governed by any form of moral authority, because the institutions have decayed. The churches are corrupt. You understand? Their parents are also not very good. And I'm not saying that everybody is bad. That's not what I'm saying. So, when you now combine what the youth have inherited with aspirational values, with wickedness, they want to imitate that which they see. Because you have to see good things and good people to be good yourself. And that is now pushing them to ritual murder. Because it is not the people of my age who are stealing girls' pants and using their brothers to go and do money magic. It is younger people in their 20s. But what they are doing in their 20s is a mirror of society that we have given them, that we have transferred to them. Thank you.
So, Prof, you talk glowingly about the need for values, but in the Nigerian context, there's been an erosion of
It's gone. Yeah.
I remember in one of your pieces, you highlighted that values, rather than political restructuring, hold the key to unlocking the nation's potential and addressing its challenges. You went on further to say that the importance of aspirations of growth and prosperity, effective leadership and strong values are intricately linked to achieving these goals. Concerning the fact that there's been an erosion of values, how do we get out of this? What we call it a sinkhole, so to say.
So they're talking about restructuring.
Exactly.
It's a good idea. But what they mean is basically political restructuring, as in regionalism, empowering the federal structure. But they are not talking about the restructuring of values. No matter how many political restructuring they do, if values are not restructured, it's a waste of time. There's no concentration of bad people in any one state. All the politicians are the same, whether they are from Bono or your. I tell them, my Igbo friends, that when you've received federal allocation from Abuja, is it Hausa and Fulani people who spend the money for you? Is it Hausa and Fulani people who steal their location for Anambra and Abia? They are your own people. Is it the Fulani man that steals the money for your state? The Yoruba people. So when those values cannot eradicate corruption, and when those values, the existing values, cannot remove the greed, when the existing values cannot remove wickedness, you can restructure as many times as possible. You are just reproducing the same thing, the same problem. If you create the Oduduwa Republic, what does that mean? Does it mean that all the Yoruba thieves and corrupt people will relocate to northern Nigeria? It doesn't work like that. They will still be here, and they will also mismanage the same space. Now, historically, societies have dealt with these issues in history in which they reform themselves. So, you know, when we talk about feudal age, when we talk about early modern, when we talk about Renaissance age, is the attempts, the successful attempts by society to reform themselves and produce a new era. So the Japanese aristocracy in the 19th century, many of them were as bad as Nigerian politicians, but they did value transformation and that re-engineered their social spaces and their economy. Malaysia, Singapore, all of them, they passed through this, leaving behind moral degeneracy and reforming themselves. But some people make the argument that Nigeria has not reached the bottom. That if they have not reached the bottom, right, then the struggle to generate those new values are not expansive enough. Because if the young people say, okay, they can leave the country, they can check out of the country, then they say, okay, the country can go to the dogs if I have my way to go and live in France and London. But one of the three conditions, it must be that cultural reformation. That's one. The second, we have to recapitalize poor people. So, if the basic element in running any society is, if you leave a large percentage of your people without opportunities, they will destroy the people you give opportunities to. If I have 3 successful children and society produces unsuccessful children, the unsuccessful one will kill my own children. That's just the logic of society. So that to maintain stability in most societies, you must ensure that the majority of the people are able to fulfill the basic needs. Otherwise, we fall to what the Yoruba call ara roku, the hen that patches on a rope. The rope is not balanced, and the chicken itself
is not comfortable. He was very right about that. Earlier on, Prof, you mentioned, you stated that 130 million Nigerians are living below the poverty line, if I may put it that way. And you know, some of your critics have taken a swipe at your personality, that you used to be at the forefront of criticizing, you know, the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, especially because of his anti-people policy. But they say some have the opinion that you have seemed to have watered down on those criticisms during this period.
I don't think they are reading me. I was the very first to actually respond to the subsidy. I said, Mr. President, let the poor breathe. It's published. I criticized him on his policy on Niger. I wrote a third one, and I'm releasing another one before Christmas. That people are suffering. So I do not know where they get that idea from. And one other criticism is that I was supporting his bid to become president. I said, where did you get all these ideas from? But as a writer, people will read you irrespective of, there's nothing you can do about that. But I'm very relentless in my critique. Not that I want the system to collapse, but I've been very relentless.
Some Nigerians are of the opinion that the president himself seems to be a tone-deaf president. Do you agree with that?
Well, I've had that because, so here is the way it works in politics. So, because politics is not difficult to understand. When you wake up in the morning, even when you are not a politician, the people you talk to, once we can identify them, we can see the currents of influence. And the currents of influence will affect your decision making. So, look at the ministers. Many of them are already wealthy. Look at the chief of staff, those who surround him, they're already wealthy. So I think in any meeting, if you're mentioning that people don't have 30,000, that is not enough for them to buy suya. The money they give to their side chick, thanks to Mr. Zadi, power to the people. It's far more than them. So I think there's a disconnect. There's that disconnect, which leads to the argument that maybe he's tone deaf. There's a disconnect between his ministers, those who see him every day, and the living people. And the manifestation of that disconnect, which I will also write about, is that birthday celebration of the Senate president. It puts everything together for people to see that at this very moment, Lagbaja is complaining, Temedo is complaining. You do your birthday very lavishly in the public glare, and they were even asking senators and politicians to contribute a humongous amount of money. But also see the followership problem. That stadium was filled up. The stadium that he built with state money that he named after himself, it's filled up with people clapping for him. And you see, when Obi Kubana buried his mom, and we saw something similar, you saw how the public was in outrage. But he did it, and he got away with it. And that birthday represents, to me, one of the ultimate markers of this degeneracy. And the same Senate president accidentally announced that they should collect Christmas money. The money has been transferred to their account. So I think that insensitivity blends with the complaint that is tone deaf.
Sad to say. As an historian, I'd like to, earlier on you mentioned the fact that there is need to look at the historical context of events in the past, and you mentioned the case of Japan, Singapore, and other countries like that. From your perspective, sir, historical events and context as may influence Nigeria's politics here in Nigeria. What lessons can be learned from the past to address the present challenges? Looking at two cases, for example, the crisis in Ondo State with Akeredolu, that's the governor who is not feeling too well at this point in time, and the crisis of
River State.
Exactly, and then the crisis in River State. Sir. We would like to get your perspective on this. Sir.
So, in the 60s, with power competition between the Action Group and the NNDP, they were calling Ibadan and that area the Wide West, because people were angry. And when Ogunde released Yoruba Ronu, the Akintola government banned that song. You can't play it on the radio. So we've seen, and during the Second Republic, remember when the MPN rigged the election, you know, what was then Ondo State. Many people lost their lives. They burned. Political heavyweights were killed and they burned houses. But what we've now done now, the escalation, is a total lack of regard for citizens. So you have a fight, you go and set the assembly, part of it on fire. You don't want the members of the assembly to meet, and you destroyed the building. That is a total lack of morality. I understand the political calculation, but it means that that politics is totally devoid of morality. That you can burn down the assembly. I mean, the symbol of democracy, you just burn it down. Just because you want to protect your own seat as a governor, you see that degeneracy. And with respect to our good friend Atiko, Atike, we call him Atife, because he started, people don't know that he started his politics as a student. So, is this the first time it will happen? No. Remember Yaradua? Before he became president, Obasanjo was campaigning in Mako, and they told him, this man was sick. He took his phone. Yaradua,
are you dead?
Are you dead? And then he died. And they created a fake government running on his behalf. He died. Then remember, 8 months Buhari, we do not know what happened to him till they didn't tell us. The presidential plane was parked, landing right every day. We do not know the total tab that the country spent on taking care of him. And remember Tinubu too, during the campaign, I think what his Babalawo told him is that, you know, for you to recover your health and not die, you better win that presidency and live in Aso Rock. Because since he entered Aso Rock now, his health has improved. Or again, we wouldn't know because they don't tell us. So there have been precedents. The Akeredolu one, the man who was sick, he had prostate cancer, is terribly healed. But I think they don't want to transfer the power to his deputy. Remember, since 1999, if I ask you the question, although you are the one asking me questions, how many deputy governors have become governors? They are not up to 3, maybe 1. Because by the time you are deputy governor, alliances have been formed, you begin to fight, you begin to sabotage one another. So, but nature is nature. Nature said you can't be governor again, it's time for you to go home. He's still collecting salary, by the way.
Yeah.
Because he's not dead. And all this nonsense of forging his signature, his wife doing a mini cabinet, I think it goes back to how this democracy has degenerated to something else.
Degenerated indeed.
Yeah.
What's your take on the president's intervention in both of these crises at the time, the intervention of the president, sir?
So, look at all Nigerian institutions, whether it's